Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Podcast Answer Man. This is Cliff Ravenscraft, and this is a production of the Generally Speaking Podcast Network. You can find this and all of our other shows over at gspn.tv. And today I have quite an exciting episode of the Podcast Answer Man. One of the things I've decided to do recently is to see if I can seek out some of my favorite podcasters. The people that really have inspired me in the area of podcasting, and introduce you to them and what their shows are all about, why I fell in love with those shows, and ask them some of the questions of how they're doing podcasting. I figure, there is a lot of other people out there that have a wealth of knowledge that I can learn from, and if I'm going to have a conversation with them, why not allow you to benefit with me? And so today I am very excited to announce that one of my favorite podcasters is on Skype with us right now, and his name is Mark Hunter from the Tartan podcast, found at tartanpodcast.com. And I just want to go ahead and say hello there, Mark. How are you?
Hi, Cliff. I'm fine. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem. I'm so glad that we could pull this together, and I mean literally at the last minute.
And of course, the time difference doesn't help, but we've managed to counteract that, and here we are. It's great.
Yes, it is. In fact, let's see, just so folks know, it is about 5:40 in the evening here, p.m., in northern Kentucky, and you're in Scotland. Where at in Scotland are you?
I'm in Glasgow, which is sort of central Scotland.
Alrighty, and what time is it there currently?
It's 20 to 11 at night, so we're 5 hours ahead of you guys on. You're not on the East Coast, are you, Cliff?
I am on the East Coast, absolutely.
East Coast, so we're 5 hours ahead.
Wonderful. Well, it's so exciting to have you on here, Mark. I've been listening to the Tartan podcast now for probably a good 9 or 10 months, I believe.
Is that right? Yeah, quite a while.
Quite a while.
It's coming up for the 2-year anniversary. I think it's the 20th of March is the 2-year anniversary of the first Tartan podcast.
Very cool. Well, we're going to talk about the Tartan podcast in just a little bit, and obviously you're involved in much more in the area of podcasting than just that single show. I know you've got other shows and your hands in all kinds of things, and hopefully we'll get to that in just a moment. But I'm going to ask you to do me a favor, Mark, and just give us a short bio of yourself. Just if you could just provide us with where you're from, just some interesting things like, are you married? Do you have any kids? Do you have a day job, or did you have a day job? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I think I'm your sort of typical male podcaster in that I'm a white 30-something father. There's so many other podcasters that fall into the same demographic as me, but I'm in my 30s, I'm married, I've got 2 young children, and I'm self-employed. I run a small window cleaning business, and it was really the fact that I'm a window cleaner, which is a fairly mundane job that admittedly pays well but offers you no sort of mental or creative stimulation whatsoever, that got me into podcasting in the first place 2 years ago. So that's basically my story. It's fairly simple, and it's probably fairly typical. A guy in his 30s looking for something interesting and creative to do, and I stumbled into podcasting.
Wonderful. That's exciting, and you're right. I definitely fall into that same exact demographic. Now, I was introduced to you through, I think you contacted me after listening to our Lost podcast.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that was I think last summer, and I'd sort of just got into Lost. And being a podcaster, the first thing you do, and I'm sure you're the same, Cliff, when you discover something new, whether it's a new technology or a new TV show, the first thing you do is you go to the podcast directories and you look for a podcast relating to it. And that's what I'd done with Lost. I'd found your podcast and a couple of others, and I can't remember why I got in touch, but anyway, I got in touch a while ago, and it was good that I was able to switch you on to some of the music that I was playing at the time.
Yes, in fact, that's matter of fact. We're going to talk about the Tartan podcast, but before unless this is your first show, can you tell me, Mark, how did you first get into podcasting? What was the first podcast you ever heard of, and then how did you eventually evolve into getting the podcasting, doing the podcasting yourself?
It was late January, early February 2005, and I was waiting for my iPod to be delivered, and I was looking on a website that used to be called iPod Lounge, and they sort of did a lot of kind of frequently asked questions about iPods, and it's while I was there I noticed they had a news item about podcasts, and I think my iPod arrived not long afterwards. And I thought I'll try these podcasts out, and I downloaded a few. I think there was three mentioned. It was the Daily Source Code, the Don and Drew Show, which were the two ubiquitous podcasts of the time. But there was a third one called Hardcore Insomnia Radio, and that was the first one I listened to, and it turned out it was a music podcast, an indie music podcast, produced by a guy called Jason Evangelo, who's over in California, and I just was really impressed by the music, but also the production that Jason had put in. And being a music lover myself, it was listening to Insomnia Radio that inspired me to do my own podcast and to choose music podcasting as the first genre of podcasts that I would dip my toe into. I think I listened to podcasts for maybe about 3 or 4 weeks before I finally decided that I would have a go myself, and I had a little cheap plastic microphone that plugged straight into the sound card of the PC I was using at the time, and I recorded the first Tartan podcast. I decided on the name Tartan Podcast before I'd recorded. I thought I would use the word Tartan because it sort of denotes Scotland, and it turned out I think only the second or third podcaster from Scotland at the time, and it was the first music podcast from Scotland. So it was quite an exciting time in the podcast universe. Everything was still very new. There was only maybe about a couple of thousand podcasts worldwide at the time. So it was a really exciting time. Everybody was really friendly and helpful. And in this month's Podcast User Magazine, I tell the second part of the story as to how I became a podcaster. So if people are interested in learning a bit more, go over to podcastusermagazine.com and they can download a free copy of the magazine and read all about it.
Very cool. Yes, that's podcastusermagazine.com. And that's an excellent publication. I'm sure you'll talk about your involvement in that in just a moment. But as far as this Tartan podcast, now that we're on the subject, just so people have a feel for kind of what the Tartan podcast is. Now, recently I had you do an intro for the new My Crazy Life daily format that I'm doing. And I was really surprised. I mean, you did a wonderful job, and I really like the intro that I have. But I was totally shocked to hear the bagpipes in the intro, because when I heard, when you had first contacted me and said, I do a music podcast from Scotland, and you might be interested in the music that I play. And I'm thinking to myself, I really do like bagpipes, but I can't imagine listening to a podcast of all music with bagpipes. And so that's, as soon as I heard Tartan podcast, I'm a music podcaster from Scotland, me being culturally illiterate or culturally challenged at the time, basically, that's what I thought of. And then it was so funny because I went and I listened to your podcast, and the very first episode I ever listened to was Tartan Podcast episode 94, which, by the way, is your number one best Tartan podcast on the face of this planet. I love that one. And then 95 and 96 are just right in line. I think the reason why I liked them is because you were at the time picking out your favorite songs of the past year. Yeah, so it was kind of the best of the best. Remember. And
I'm just actually going to the Tartan Podcast website to remind myself what I played. Tartan Podcast 94, let me have a look.
Yeah, while you're looking at that, I one of them, is Amplifico one of them, the comedy stops here?
I think that was on... I think that was maybe on 95.
Okay. Well, if you don't mind, I'm gonna play for our listening audience one of the songs that you introduced, and this is a Scottish artist. Their name is Amplifico, right?
Yeah, they're Amplifico. They're an Edinburgh-based band. So Edinburgh is the capital of Scotland. It's over on the east coast of the country, and they're a band that have been together since they were children, really. They've sort of come and gone. They've joined other bands. They've split up and they've come together again. and they're just really accomplished musicians and songwriters, and they're just such a great band, and it's just such a pity that they don't have a record deal.
And, well, in a way, it's a pity that they don't have a record deal. By the way, you can check them out at myspace.com/Amplifico. That's AMPLIFICO. But in a way, it's a blessing to us, at least as podcasters, that they don't have one of those record deals that does not allow us to play their music and spread it. And so if it weren't for that, I would have never heard it. And so I'm going to go ahead and play this song, and then we'll come back and talk about some of the other music you've played and how you get to pull some of these artists into your show.
Sounds good.
Okay, so that's Amplifico, The Comedy Stops Here. If you want to hear the remaining balance of that song, I encourage you to go to tartanpodcast.com and go back in the archives and search for episode 95. And you'll hear that along with some other great things. And I gave you the MySpace page, but also go check out at amplificowebathon.com. And that is a great site where they did some video podcasts, and through some linking there, you'll be able to see some of their live shows. I remember spending like 3 hours one morning, Mark, just checking out the stuff they do. It's just amazing.
Yeah, they're a really prolific band, not just in their songwriting, but the fact that they've embraced podcasting. They've got a podcast, they've got a video podcast, like you mentioned. I think they were the first Scottish band to properly integrate podcasting into their marketing, which was really encouraging.
Yeah, very encouraging and very smart, by the way.
Yeah, definitely.
So let me ask you this. Now, you obviously are a music aficionado. You're really into music. Now, has podcasting introduced you to a whole slew of artists in the Scotland or the Scottish independent music industry, and are people contacting you, and are you being introduced to new artists that now you're finding that you're absolutely just loving the new bands that are out there that you would have otherwise not heard of?
It's something that surprised me. I mean, Scotland's got a population of just 5 million people, but the fact that I was able to go for probably over a year and not listen to any music other than music that was made by Scottish bands was really quite incredible. And I'm not talking about Scottish bands that are already in the charts. I'm talking about Scottish bands that for the most part are unsigned, or if they are signed up, it's to a small independent label in some remote part of Scotland. There's just such a wealth of talent here in Scotland. I think it's something that's intrinsic in the Scottish nature, is to be creative and to be musical. And it certainly shows by the fact that there's so many talented indie Scottish bands, and it's completely revolutionised my listening habits. It's only just in the past maybe 3 or 4 months that I've gone back and started listening to the bands that I would listen to before I started podcasting, like Radiohead and R.E.M. and U2. For such a long time, all I listened to was indie Scottish bands. Not just because I created a show, that showcased them, but it's because they were so good.
Yes, and I'll have to second that, Mark, because I'll be honest with you, I am still only listening to PodSafe music artists 8 months into being introduced to them for the first time.
I think that's I think that's the eye-opening thing about podcasts, and it's also why podcasting is so powerful for these bands, because it's a shame that they don't get the recognition that they deserve. That the radios are, that the radio stations are monopolised by maybe 3 or 4 huge monster bands or artists, and these smaller bands that are much more talented for the most part really don't get a fair crack at getting a big audience. But that's where we as podcasters and podcast listeners have got a responsibility and a privilege to showcase them, and also to support them by buying their music if we can.
Absolutely. And in fact, as a podcaster, I go and I purchase all the music that I'm offered for free as a podcaster. I mean, these folks send me their stuff and allow me to download it and play it for free on my show. Personally, as an example to my audience, I go and I purchase the music myself and
That's
say
good.
that I support these artists, and I really hope that you'll do the same. And as an there are a couple podcasters, Mark, that have inspired me, and I would say of those who have truly inspired me in a way that actually changes the way that I podcast myself, there are probably about 5 or 6 on that list, and I listen to probably about 40 different podcasts on a consistent basis. And you were one of the 5 or 6 that have inspired me to do something differently in podcasting. And
That's good. I'm glad. I'm glad it's worked. That you can listen to what I'm doing, and that you want to support indie Scottish bands as well. That's encouraging to hear.
Yeah, in fact, I started the Musically Challenged podcast here at the GSPN, and I started it off with some of the music that I've heard from your shows. And now in the Tartan podcast, now you don't limit it only to Scottish music. I mean, obviously most of it is, but occasionally you'll slip in something else, won't you?
I mean, to be honest with you, I play 3 tracks per show, and 9 times out of 10, all 3 tracks will be by a Scottish band. There has been a few rare occasions where on the Tartan podcast I'll play something that's been made by a band, that are based elsewhere. Occasionally it's been by accident. I've got confused with the emails that I've received. I've assumed that they're from Scotland, and I've played them. But I produced the Mellow Monday show, which is a music podcast that plays music from wherever in the world, as long as the music's mellow. But certainly on the Tartan podcast, I made a sort of a firm rule with myself that I would keep it to Scottish bands.
Well, I'm very glad that there was one that slid through, and it's one that I've actually played on at least 7 or 8 different episodes of our various podcasts. And I'm going to play for our audience just maybe 10 or 15 seconds of a band by the name of the Chromozones, and that's KROMOZONES, and they're from New York City. So here is a song from your past that you may recognize, Mark.
Sometimes I bite my tongue so hard, swallowing my blood for days. It's good to speak your mind and get things out, but do it with some tact and a little grace. So think it over, before you speak. Sometimes it's just better to say nothing and turn the other cheek.
Okay, so the Chromozones, another artist, another band that I have to say thank you for introducing me to.
Yeah, I mean, that was an unusual one. That was one where genuinely it was a mistake on my part to play them on the Tartan podcast. They probably would have fitted into the Mellow Monday show because it is, quite a chilled out track. But I was glad I played them as well. They're an excellent band, and they gave me some positive feedback on the response that they received after I played them, which is good. That's the whole point.
Absolutely. So, okay, so we've talked about the Tartan podcast, and you've mentioned the Mellow Monday show, and you only just barely glanced, and I don't think people may have caught it, but the Sleepy Sunday show. Tell us about those two shows, and then tell us about some other things you're involved in.
Yeah, the Sleepy Sunday show started, it was, I think May or June 2005. And I had the idea where it would be a music podcast that you could just relax to on a Sunday morning if you didn't have anything else to do. Just chill out, have some coffee, and listen to the Sleepy Sunday show. It turned out to be the most popular and well-received podcast that I've produced up until now. I think the downloads for the Sleepy Sunday show were ridiculous, and if I look back at the archives, people are still downloading them now. But unfortunately, time made it really difficult to consistently produce the Sleepy Sunday show, so I dropped it from the lineup for a while. But then I heard that Cameron Riley over at the Podcast Network was looking for some music shows, and I spoke to him, and he wanted the Tartan podcast. But you know what it's like, Cliff. A podcast is your baby; you hold on to it. And I didn't want to give him the Tartan podcast, but I came up with the Mellow Monday show, which I've created for the Podcast Network. But basically, it was just the Sleepy Sunday show reinvented. And the premise is it's 4 or 5 songs that you can listen to while you're on the train or the bus or on the commute to work or school on a Monday morning or whatever morning suits, whenever you need to hear some mellow music. So those are 2 podcasts that are still available. The Mellow Monday show is still live. The Sleepy Sunday show is available via the Tartan Podcast website. I think the category link is on the right-hand side of the page. And as of the 1st of March, I released the PlayStation 3 show, which is another podcast produced for the Podcast Network, and it's completely centred on Sony's PlayStation 3. So it's sort of news, reviews, and interviews surrounding the PlayStation 3.
And I as you probably saw on my Twitter page today, or my Twitter status.
Yeah, I noticed that, yeah.
I listened to the first probably 20 minutes of it while I was at work today in the background. And what's funny is I don't own a PlayStation 3. I never owned a 2. I had the original PlayStation, and I'm an Xbox fan. But I actually found myself very interested in listening to your PlayStation 3 podcast, simply because there's a personal connection to you as a podcaster, and I'm sure you hear that time and time again from your listeners, and I've experienced that, is that people will come and listen to just about anything that you'll produce because they really feel like that in a way there's a friendship or a connection that's been built. Have you experienced that as a podcaster?
Yeah, it's quite unusual, and for someone who, for us that we're ordinary guys, the rest of the time when we're not podcasting, it's something that takes a little bit of getting used to, is the fact that people do invest in you as a podcaster. They give you their time, they give you their ears on a regular basis, and they do feel that they've developed a sort of bond with you, even though you may not personally know them by name. So the responsibility comes with that, but it's also a privilege that people give you so much of their time listening to you on the bus or at work. And yeah, definitely people will follow you from one podcast to another. I'm sure you find that because you produce many podcasts, that you have the same people listening to you on all the various different shows that you're on, and it's quite a nice thing, and it's an unusual thing, and it certainly took me quite a while to get used to as a podcaster.
Yes. Let me ask you, how are you interacting with your audience? Are you fitting that in? Is there anything special that you do to really facilitate any community around your podcasts?
I tried having a forum, and it's really hard work because you've always got to promote it, and you've always got to put stuff on the forum that people will react to. And I lacked the time and probably the dedication that was needed. On the Tartan Podcast website, most shows will have a few comments from people, some more than others. But it's just one of these things that it's just through time you build up an audience. Your audience talk to you via email, and they'll put a comment on your website. But other than that, I don't really do a lot to sort of facilitate any further communication. I think there's a Frapper map somewhere. There's definitely a MySpace page. I just lack the time really to devote to developing more of a community than I probably could have.
And as this is not really your typical interview podcast, this is really the show here is the podcast Answer Man, which is hopefully this is a podcast for podcasters to get ideas. Yeah. And one of the things that I found in my forum is that our listening audience wanted to interact. Of course, we had a topic such as Lost, which just generates a huge amount of discussion.
Yeah, it certainly helps if your podcast. This is the thing: if you're a new podcaster, think about the subject matter that you're talking about. So, in my primary podcast, the Tartan podcast, it's music. Music doesn't always generate discussion. People will say, yeah, I liked the track, or I didn't like the track. But something like Lost, for example, as you said, generates discussion. That's the purpose. That's a big part of what that show is. And with my new podcast, the PlayStation 3 show, my hope is that discussion and community can be built around that, because we'll be covering news items, we'll be reviewing games. Hopefully there'll be more of a community around that. But when it's music, it's a little bit trickier to develop a community of people that are willing to discuss the songs that you play. So for a new podcast, think about your format, think about your subject matter, and if you feel it lends itself to community, then make sure you provide your listeners with the tools, like a forum, like comments on your blog, like a MySpace page, a Frapper account, where you can really build a community around about your subject matter.
Right, and from my experience, for anybody who's interested in creating a community through a forum, what I found is that when I tried to do it myself, I like you, Mark, I just don't have the time for it.
Yeah.
And I had listeners beg me, "Can we do a forum? Can you do a forum?" And I'm like, "No, I can't. I just don't have the time for it." And so I had one listener that just said, "Listen, I will do it for you. And I'll take all responsibility, and I'll give you complete editorial control over everything." And so as you build an audience and you develop a relationship with some of these people through via email, you can find out who it is that you can really count on as a listener. Yeah. and allow some of your people to get some ground as a participant in what you're doing. And so I have 3 site administrators on my forum, and I'd be honest with you, I probably hop onto my forum about 3 times a week, and I will read what's been going on, and my site administrators do everything, and that's just really amazing.
Good. Yeah, that's really good if you can get that. That's excellent.
So and maybe your PlayStation 3, maybe that's a way that you could interact with them and have somebody else do a majority of that work for you. So,
yeah, I hope so. We've got the voicemail line set up so people can call in. I've got it set up that, and I actually encourage people on the podcast to just put the numbers into their cell phone, and just dial through. I know you've had a good response in the Lost podcast with people calling in, and that's what I hope to do. I noticed you've done it a few times in the past. You used Skype, a Skype cast, and you now use TalkShoe, and that's something I'd love to do at some point in the future, is to do a live show, have it streaming out on a feed or via TalkShoe, and have people respond immediately, because you might experience this. You're at work and you're listening to a podcast and you think, oh, when I get home I really need to send off an email about what was talked about on that podcast, and then when you get home you've forgotten all about it. But if people can react immediately, I think that really helps to build a responsive community.
It does, and I will tell you that my life as a podcaster changed when I started doing the live Lost podcast. And what's amazing is now I'm actually finding that a higher percentage of my emails that I get from listeners are generally much more positive in nature. And here's the reason why: because Cliff, as just your normal, average, everyday guy who happens to just be a huge fan that likes to watch Lost. Yeah. I'm not one of those guys that spends 50 hours a week, searching every frame by frame. And so occasionally I'll say something in a recorded podcast that is factually incorrect, and that would generate about 60, 70, sometimes even 300 emails from people saying, "What are you, an idiot? What kind of you call yourself a lost podcaster?" And in the live shows, you immediately get the people out there that are your fact checkers. And so that's been my greatest reward of having live shows, is that really people keep you on your toes, and you get more factual information, and you get perspectives that you would not get any other way.
And it's great that the tools are now there for new podcasters to be able to do that, to produce a live show and give people the chance to respond right away. When I started, there was Skype, but that was it. There was Skype and Audacity. Those were the only tools available to podcasters. It's great how things have moved on.
Oh, yes. So, as talking about moving on, let's step out of our podcasting shoes for just a moment. And what I noticed that you're involved in a couple other things. Now, we've already brought up just briefly, you had mentioned Podcast User Magazine. Tell us what that is and what is your involvement there?
Well, this was an idea that was pitched. It must be. I'm trying to remember. It was well over a year ago now, on a forum that I used to frequent for British podcasters, and the idea was sort of shot down in flames. Let's produce a magazine, a podcast-centric magazine. But the idea was shot down. Oh, who would buy it? But then the guys that come up with the idea settled on making a PDF magazine that would be free. So it's an electronic magazine that you download and you read it on your computer, or you can print it up or transfer it to an external device like a phone that reads PDFs, or a PlayStation Portable, for example. And once that idea was settled on, then it got legs and it began to run. But I was unaware of this happening until I was approached by a podcast listener who's an editor as a day job, and she suggested that maybe I would like to get on board as well. But my proviso was that I would only get on board if I could have my own column, which was very vain of me. But I'd always wanted to write a column, and they said, sure, write the column. I asked my listeners, what should we call the column? And a listener who's now a podcaster in his own right, a guy called Paul, suggested Mark My Words. So that's what I settled on, and I write a monthly column for Podcast User Magazine. Also design the front cover, and the issue that's out just now, and for the next couple of issues, I'm going to be writing articles within the magazine, including one where I interview the guys behind the John Cleese podcast, which I'm really looking forward to. So it's just great to be able to, apply the knowledge that I've got and the keenness I have to write, but use it in an actual magazine. It's actually really fulfilling.
Right, and so if anybody's listening to this podcast, they're definitely interested in learning more about podcasting, and so there'd be no greater place than to go to the Podcast User Magazine website.
I think so. I think that part of I remember when I was starting, you're always looking around for websites with instructions, and you're maybe emailing podcasters and hoping they'll reply to the questions that you have. But the great thing about Podcast User Magazine, it just puts everything under one roof. So each month there's tutorials, there's hardware reviews, they review software like Cast Blaster or WinPodder. They interview established podcasters, like guys that are maybe even professionals now, and they get tips from them. The writing staff is also made up mostly of podcasters that have round about a year to 2 years experience in the medium. So it's just a great place to go, and you get all your answers and suggestions and tips under one roof. On March the 1st, the 14th issue was released. So we've been going for over a year, which, even if I do say so, is quite an achievement really, because other magazines have started up and finished within that time period, but Podcast User Magazine's kept going, and I think it really just comes down to the quality of the articles that are in the magazine for new podcasters.
Right, I totally agree, and I fully endorse that our listeners go and check that. If you're a podcaster, or if you're considering podcasting, it's definitely a place you want to go, and that's podcastusermagazine.com. Now, Mark, I'm looking at a website in front of me. It's something about talkingvoices.com. You ever heard of that?
Yeah, Talking Voices. It's a company I'm involved in. I'm a stakeholder, and I'm also the senior producer for Talking Voices. Like yourself, Cliff, I've got the desire to to podcast as a business, as a means to make the line of my income. But I think the problem that a lot of creative people have is the business side of things. It's not always easy to apply yourself to putting the business model in place. And last year, the guys behind Talking Voices contacted me and asked if I would fly down to London and meet them. And they explained that we're putting this business together, and they outlined who was in the team at the company, and it was people that had the needed skills to sort of run a decent business, but they wanted me on as a sort of creative person and as a podcast producer. So we had a series of meetings, and I was pleased to sign the contract to become a senior producer at Talking Voices back in January of 2007. And we've already got an established client base. We've got meetings coming up. We've got potential clients, and it's all really exciting stuff.
That is extremely exciting. So that answers my next question. Have you been able to bring in any sort of income for that family of yours through the use of podcasting?
Well, in 2005, I was one of the first podcasters to sign up with Podshow. And there was myself and I think 6 other music podcasters were signed to front up the PodSafe Music Network. And obviously the reason that you sign with Podshow is because you believe that you're going to get some money. Unfortunately, I think signing a British-based podcaster was maybe just a little bit ahead of the curve, because back in 2005 there were no advertisers willing to touch British podcasts, which was a bit of a shame. And I felt my energies would be better placed elsewhere, so I focused on being independent during 2006. And round about September time, that started to pay off. I received a couple of consultancy contracts, and on my own, I received the contract to produce a podcast for a cancer charity that we're in pre-production with just now. And then, of course, as I already said, Talking Voices came along, and I'm now going to be working with them. So, yeah, it's taken a while. I think a lot of us that started podcasting in 2005, early 2005, thought that the following year, the cash should be flowing in, and it wasn't the case. But I think the way things are shaping up in 2007, I think there's going to be a little bit more money around about the medium than has been previously.
Yes.
And so for guys like us, that are producers and we want to make a business out of it, I think 2007 might just be the year.
I agree. In fact, I recall it was, I don't know, about 4 months ago that I was approached by Podshow and invited to join the official network through contractual agreement. And now I believe that, being that I had some entertainment-based shows, finding advertising would have been no issue. But what I found is that I really enjoyed the idea of being independent and owning everything I have, and just giving up any rights to any content and allowing people to possibly make a great deal of money without me getting a fair share. Not that Podshow doesn't offer a fair share, because to be honest with you, we didn't even go further into negotiation after I read the contract. And the contract isn't bad. And then if you're a podcaster by hobby and you always hope to make it a hobby, and you just want some income and have somebody go find you some advertisers and really promote your show, Podshow is an excellent source. And it would work even for some other people. But I
totally agree with you. If it's if you're a hobbyist, then great. You can get enough money to pay your Libsyn bill, and to pay your web hosting and maybe buy a decent mic. But I think I agree with you, Cliff, about being independent. If you hold all the cards, then you've got a little bit more power to negotiate. And there are companies out there. I know Blueberry, Todd Cochrane's company, they're doing some really, really competitive deals for podcasters where you don't sign over anything to them at all. They've already pre-negotiated their cut of the deal, and then they present the deal to you with what your share will be. It's quite upfront. There's another company called Cheese, which is spelt with a Z or a Z, as you say in North America. Cheese.com, I believe it is. And they're encouraging podcasters to think about becoming ambassadors for companies, where rather than you playing a pre-recorded ad that's been made by somebody else, you personally endorse the product or the service. So there's a number of different avenues out there that if you're independent, you can dabble with to find out which one works for you.
I'm looking for that cheese.com.
It's on them. It's definitely on the Podcast Nation web homepage, podcastnation.co.uk.
Okay,
and they advertise in the podcast directory there. Cheese.com.
Okay, we'll put that in the show notes. I'll look it up and definitely get that. Now that's something that I just heard of for the first time, and so that's exactly why I want to do this interviewing stuff with other podcasters, because you get to hear things that perhaps you don't know yourself, and so I'm really looking forward to that. And one of the things that I've been able to do is through TalkShoe.com. It's again, like you're saying, like the Blueberry Network. I didn't sign anything over. I allowed them to put advertisements in front of my show, and they split the income with me 50-50, and I'm starting to see some income coming in.
That's really good. Yeah, excellent. I think that's the thing. It's nice to make it pay a little bit. I mean, all hobbies have expenses. If you play golf, you've got to put down some serious money for a set of golf clubs, maybe some golf lessons. If you like to paint, you need to buy paints and an easel. All hobbies have their expenses, but with podcasting, you can't help but think, because it is media, there's the opportunity to earn a little bit of those expenses back.
Right.
So I'm glad it's working out.
And for us, I know for yourself and for myself, there are a lot of people who start out as a hobby. And I remember when I started out doing podcasting, and I'm just asking people, just, hey, if you're interested in supporting what we're doing, we have a PayPal donate button. And we have been so blessed over here by our listeners and the support that they've given. I've never actually had a point where this has been a financial burden as a hobby. But I remember early on, people was like, listen, why do you keep mentioning your PayPal button? This is a hobby for you. I don't ask you to come pay for my golfing. But for you and I and for several other people, we've taken this beyond the realm of a hobby, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a life-changing thing if you can produce a podcast that a lot of people listen to, and has an impact on people. You've obviously got a very loyal fan base for the Lost podcast, for example. I know that I've got a loyal fan base for the Tartan podcast. That's affecting people's lives, and it's something that it's a talent that we've got, and there's a real chance to make some cash out of it. I was really fortunate also with the PayPal donate button. It was it was 2005, I'm trying to think of the month, May 2005, I believe it was. I was featured really briefly on an NPR show over there in the States, and someone listening to that show went onto the Tartan Podcast website and sent me a substantial sum of money, which effectively bought all my studio gear that I'm still using today.
That's awesome.
And her name's Yardley Smith, who happens to be the voice actor behind Lisa Simpson of The Simpsons. So that was really cool. That was a really nice experience.
That is very cool. That is cool. That is cool. And we think of one of the things is that we think of these people like the voice behind Lisa Simpson. We think that's somebody that's a celebrity. Have you found that people ever consider you as a celebrity?
I mean, I don't know. I suppose I think I've met listeners. I was at the Podcast Expo in 2005. I've been at a couple of conventions here in the United Kingdom. I've been to see a couple of bands in the past, and listeners have been there. And people do tend to be a little bit, wow, a little bit gasp. It's Mark Hunter, and to me that just blows my mind, because I just think behave. I'm a 35-year-old window cleaner from Glasgow.
But no, you're not Mark. You're Mark Hunter from Scotland, from the Tartan podcast.
I recognise that. I mean, I've met Dan Clash from the Bitterest Pill. I actually stopped by his home while I was over in Los Angeles, and for me that was one of those moments you feel like you're in the presence of a deity almost,
right,
when you meet Dan Clash because of his stature within podcasting. But he would tell you himself that he's just a stay-at-home dad that spends his day doing the family's laundry, and making lunches for his kids.
Yep.
So it's a little bit of an unusual phenomenon. It's the new media celebrities that we are. It's a little bit strange.
It is very strange, and my wife is learning how to deal with it. We're doing something in the Generally Speaking Podcast Network that we never would have dreamed of doing before. But we had two ladies from Chattanooga, Tennessee, said we would love to come up and meet you guys if you would do a live show. And I'm like, I don't think people do that. Now, just so you know, that's 6.5 hours of driving.
Right? Wow.
And we announced that we would do a live show, even if it was just these two ladies coming. At least we'd meet up and eat Chipotle and we'd record something. Yeah. And after I said that, just one time, 2 days later, I have people telling us they're coming from Chicago and from New York City. I'm talking 10.5-hour drives, 12-hour drives to come here and spend the week. You know, they're going to drive down here, spend the night, and come to our live show, and then drive back 6 to 12 or 14 hours. It's unbelievable.
No wonder you call it My Crazy Life.
Exactly.
That is crazy. That's nuts, isn't it? But then it's also really flattering as well.
It is very flattering, and you're so right. I mean, we're just normal guys.
I think the thing I particularly struggle with is I don't. In real life, I don't like the limelight at all. I'll run from the limelight. And at the last Talking Voices meeting in London recently, I mentioned something about me not really liking being in front of the microphone, and everyone was really surprised because they said that I sound comfortable with it. But in reality, I'm not at all. It's something that has taken me 2 years to sort of get used to, is being in front of the mic and people recognising my voice. I would much rather be on the other side of the desk doing the production side of things. So it still freaks me out a little bit when people get excitable and maybe a little bit overly enthusiastic at times. Although it is very nice and it is very flattering.
So let me ask you, Mark, where do you see yourself in podcasting in the future?
Well, I think it really depends on how 2007 works out. If it works out the way a lot of us hope, where businesses will become more aware of what podcasting is and they'll start to look to companies like Talking Voices to help them with their marketing and their online presence, then it could be the year that moves me away from being somebody that has to work outside in all weathers to someone who can actually sit at a computer using editing software and doing something that I'm passionate about and that I really, really enjoy doing. If that's the case, then, you know, it will be the icing on the cake if that happens in the next year or so. If it doesn't happen, I can see me still being a podcaster for the foreseeable future, because you feel you've got a debt that you owe to your listeners to provide regular content for them.
Very cool. As the medium, do you have any idea of what you think the future of podcasting as a whole will be?
I think last year that people thought that video podcasting was going to be the way forward, and I don't really feel that has come to fruition the way that it was prophesied that it would. I know a lot of directories, Podshow, for example, put a lot of emphasis on the video podcast, but I still believe that audio is king, and I think that as long as we keep focusing on producing the best audio we can, then people out there in the world that haven't heard of podcasting yet will start to hear about it. And because the audio is getting a little bit better, because we're all becoming a little bit more skilled at what we're doing, I think that the revolution is just around the corner. I just feel that 2007 is really a promising year for podcasting as a whole. As long as we can keep the production good and we can make it as simple as possible for new listeners.
I think you're absolutely right. And making it simple is exactly what we do. And one of the things we try to do as podcasters is definitely honor your time and not try to produce, multiple hours of podcasting for you to have to commit to. So I'm going to wrap things up here, Mark, and say thank you very much. You have, like I said, you're at the top of my list of podcasters. And obviously, you're the first podcaster that I've technically interviewed for this show, and I'm very glad that you were able to join me.
It was a pleasure and a privilege, Cliff. Thanks very much for having me on. It's been great.
And is there anything that you want to tell our audience, how they can contact you or find your podcasts?
Yeah, I think all the links have been mentioned. TartanPodcast.com for the music one. ps3.thepodcastnetwork.com for the PlayStation 3 podcast, and Podcast User Magazine for, well, the tagline for the magazine is for productive podcasters and discerning listeners, so make sure you check that out as well.
Very cool. Well, I thank you, Mark. It's been an exciting discussion that we've had here. And if anybody wants to check out his podcast, I definitely suggest that you go check out the tartanpodcast.com. Absolutely my favorite music podcast out there in the world. And he's just got an awesome voice to listen to. He may be blushed when I say that, and other people say that, but it's truly exciting to listen to Mark as he does his podcasts. And I'm just looking forward to continued friendship with him as a podcaster, learning from him, and it's just really cool. And so anyway, again, you can find, if you've heard about this podcast through some other medium other than our website, the Podcast Answer Man is a podcast production of the Generally Speaking Podcast Network. You can find this and all of our other self-produced shows at gspn.tv. And so until next time, God bless you, have a great day, and enjoy podcasting.